Welcome to Cultural Catalyst, the podcast that shines a light on the creative visionaries working behind the scenes in arts and entertainment. I'm your host, Alison McNeil, CEO and founder of McNeil Creative Enterprises. With over 20 years of experience advocating for equity and sustainable growth in the arts and entertainment, I've seen firsthand the power of the behind-the-scenes creatives. Here on Cultural Catalyst, the creatives behind the curtain take center stage. Let's celebrate the people who make the magic happen. Let's dive in. Hey there. Before we dive into this episode, I want to take a moment to acknowledge the shifts in our arts and cultural landscape since these conversations were first recorded. We've seen the challenges to institutions, including the arts, but we also have seen the resilience of creatives and cultural organizations. If you believe in the power of the arts, now is the time to take action. Support the artists and arts organizations that inspire you. Donate, amplify their work, and stay engaged. Visit Americans for the Arts to stay updated on advocacy efforts happening on Capitol Hill and across the country. Americans for the Arts provides resources and opportunities to get involved at the local, state, and national levels. We'll link their website in the show notes and continue sharing updates on our MCE Instagram. As the legendary Carrie Mae Weems reminds us, art is the one place we all turn to for solace, and we need that now more than ever. Let's show up for the arts, for our communities, and for each other. Now, let's get into this episode. I'm excited to welcome my guest, Mazi Mutafa. Mazi is a creative entrepreneur and is the founding executive director of Words, Beats, and Life, a hip-hop nonprofit established in Washington, D.C. He's an expert in the fields of Muslimness, hip-hop culture, public art, arts education, creative employment, cultural diplomacy, and centering marginalized voices. Welcome to the show, Mazi.
Thank you so much, Allison.
I was excited to have you on here because your work is so multifaceted. So I'm going to go ahead and lean into my very first question for you, which is, you've been pivotal in elevating hip-hop culture and its role in arts education. What sparked that for you? What sparked that passion for using hip-hop as a tool for social change?
Well, I think it goes back to a few things. One, hip-hop is the reason I went to college. I had been accepted to the University of Maryland as a graduate of Largo High School in Prince George's County, Maryland. But I didn't necessarily have the greatest high school experience. The only thing I really liked about high school was playing baseball and my high school sweetheart. But there was a day where she asked me where I was going to college. And because I wasn't really enjoying high school, I wasn't planning to go. So I applied to the places that she said she was going. We both got into the University of Maryland. But I still didn't want to go until I went and sat in on a class called Blacks in Popular Culture, African American Studies 202. They were discussing Trisha Rose's seminal book, Black Noise. And it was the first time in my life I'd been sitting in a classroom and heard my lived experience centered. Not because I didn't take African American history classes in high school, but most of those were about not necessarily the past. So I decided to go to Maryland. And so thinking about the role that, not necessarily because I listened to, a ton of rap music, but thinking back over my lifetime, I had family that lived in the Bronx. So I'd spent all my summers virtually in New York City, witnessing hip hop at its birth and during its growth, but hadn't really thought about it because it was just everywhere. And this class made me look at my own life, the soundscape of my life, because a lot of the book is about the sounds included in early music, from the sounds of train doors to New York City traffic to the spray cans, et cetera. Those were all things that were in my subconscious as a part of my lived experience, but not in the foreground until that class. And I thought, how many other young people would want to go to college if they knew that things that matter to them were actually being discussed and engaged, and that they would be content experts in those spaces. And so I worked to try to create an organization some years later that centered the experiences of my own life and the lives of the people that I wanted to reach the most.
And having attended some of your events, I know how much love and effort goes into creating the experience, and how hip hop culture is all up and through the experience that you've created. Your work weaves through so many vibrant threads. What inspires that rich tapestry? In that introduction, I said, creative employment, cultural diplomacy. How do all those diverse elements come together?
To be transparent, 5 of those are priorities of the organization: arts education, creative employment, cultural diplomacy, centering marginalized voices, and for the culture are our 5 priorities. We began as a Saturday program for young people in high school. And early on, we just had to keep pivoting in order to reach the young people that we wanted. So when we started, we were just for high school students, but we found a lot of high school students had middle school and elementary siblings that needed to come with them to program if they were going to be able to come to programming. So then we had to create this kind of dynamic classroom where you could have an elementary school age child in the same room as their middle school brother or sister or their high school brother or sister. We literally talk about this to this day, that these last 2 years are the first time we've actually created age specific spaces, kind of replicating the school model for elementary school kids, because we're serving kids in 3rd grade through 5th grade as of last year. Developmentally, they don't have any brothers or sisters in the program, so it made sense to create that space just for them.
You're saying before then, it didn't matter your age or you could participate in any of the programs just as you are.
If you were younger, you needed a sibling in the program
Okay.
so that you have some sort of a connection to it. But I was telling this to my newer staff as recently as last week. And once I explained this idea of a dynamic classroom, a classroom that has beginning level students, intermediate level students, and advanced level students, there was an aha moment for one of the staffers. It was like, oh, it's just like karate. We have a white belt in the same class as a brown belt as a black belt, because it's not about how old you are. It's about how good you are at the thing that we're teaching. So you can have an elementary school kid who's been with us for 3 years in the same class as a college student who's here with us for the first time. And that elementary school kid knows more than them about the thing that we're teaching. That's really powerful for a young person. Again, like centering their power, their knowledge, and not allowing their age to be the determinant of how important their voice is in the space. Like the younger you are, the less adults or older people listen to you. But if you know more, then you can say more because you can do more.
Which has to be empowering for those young people.
Definitely. I mean, I think that one of the things we witnessed early on, we're now 21 years old as an organization. We take pride in being the first for a lot of our young people, the first people to often employ them as an artist. So all of our DJ students, the first time they get a gig is through us. Our graffiti students, the first time they get a mural commissioned is through us. So we don't just teach them the thing that they want to learn. We then employ them to do it, because the academy has 5 outcomes: skill set mastery, employability, the pursuit of a post-secondary education, community, and self-mastery. So skill set mastery, they came to us because they wanted to learn the thing, but then we want them to know how to make money using that thing. Then we want them to know the myriad of academic disciplines they could be studying in a trade school or a community college or a 4-year institution that are connected to that thing that they're already interested in, having a community to support the development and presentation of that thing that they're interested in, and then them becoming the driving force behind what's possible for their lives, because they've had the time to think and reflect and develop and have this kind of intergenerational network of other artists that they just choose to become a part of. They didn't have to, if either they or their parents found us, now they all of a sudden have this community that's invested in their success, which is what a school is supposed to be. But for a lot of young people, it's not.
Wow. I mean, in the way that you center them in the entire experience, again, you see them like they're not just a name in the classroom that you check off, but you actually see them and create the space for them to explore, to be curious, it sounds like, and to be connected to people that support their curiosity, which is a major gift. That's a major gift.
I saw a friend of mine posted on Facebook the other day. I posted the first day of programming, and a friend of mine, a former donor to WBL, said, I ran into the parents of one of those kids from that first day of programming, and the child was with them, and said, when I first got there, I was scared. I was scared because I didn't know what I was there to learn to do. He said, but by the end of that day, I felt like I belonged. That former donor was like, he was affirming for me the things that I'm saying to you that are kind of theoretical, or the frame that not only is the parent testifying to the difference just after day one, a different level of connectedness than they had before they got there.
When you sought out to start this program, was that what you were thinking of creating?
So the vision initially was very different from a structural point of view. I never intended Words Beat to Life to be my full-time job. I thought, because when I first started, I wrote a bunch of grants that were terrible and all of them got rejected. So I was like, they not supporting hip hop versus I wrote really terrible grant because it was all theoretical and ideas and not rooted in what made it clear that I knew what I was imagining could be real. And two, it was going to be an organization that had a Saturday program once a month that was led by volunteer hip hop artists. And very early on, I really didn't like that model of asking artists to volunteer. And this, the whole idea of restructuring artists for so many artists is real. I began to think about in the first 6 months, because before we had a program, we did research about what other people were doing. So at first we didn't have rap music as a part of the things we were doing because everybody was running a rap program. And it was like, why are all these people trying to convince kids to prepare to participate in an industry that doesn't really have very many jobs versus all the DJs I know work regular. The graffiti writers I know tour all over the planet making murals. Many of the dancers I know are competing for cash prizes. Most of the rappers I know are at open mics, performing for free. And so we decided to focus on the other elements of hip hop initially. And there was a crime emergency. This was back during the Williams administration. I had a friend named Retta Morris who worked in the mayor's office, and she reached out to me and said, hey, are you still running that program at the rec center? This is like 6 months in. She's like, you see running that program at the rec center? I was like, yep. And she said, well, we're looking to invest money into programs and recs to start to do late night rec opportunities to keep kids safe in particular neighborhoods of the city. If we were able to give you $40,000, could you take that once a month program you're doing and turn it into a 5-day-a-week program? And I was like, hell yeah.
Right.
And the next step was to find artists who had the time to be able to work and then work with them to develop more robust curriculum and then start delivering programs. I was at the Benning Park Recreation Center here in Washington, D.C. And kind of the rest is history because what that group of kids did was it changed how we thought about what we intended to do. Remember, I said when we started, it's for high school kids. At the rec center, it wasn't the high school kids that came to the rec center. It was the middle school kids. High school kids were out in the neighborhood doing whatever it is they do in the neighborhood. But the middle school kids came to the rec. But a lot of those middle school kids had elementary brothers and sisters. So then all of a sudden, the model that we're thinking on paper, when it gets into the neighborhood, has to be something different. So the ability to pivot and to then identify the need. Like there's so many things we did that were inspired by those kids at Benning Park that started off as very simple things. Many people who've heard the name Words Beats in Life saw it on a t-shirt before they knew about the organization. And so we created things like a college material program because I just envisioned all of these little kids, these little elementary and middle school kids, and even some of the high school kids walking around the neighborhood. They're college material if they want to be. So it started off as a t-shirt campaign, just having kids walking around the neighborhood with a t-shirt that affirmed what was possible. So much of the work over time is responding to the needs identified by the young people, identified by their parents, and also identified by eventually school administrators and communities. None of what it is today was a part of the original vision. The original vision was so much smaller and seemed so much more attainable because we were only asking for one Saturday a month from the artists and from the young people. But I didn't tell you, after that very first session, we had a rebellion because when we said, okay, great, everybody, we'll see you next month. They were like, what? We had to wait a whole month for this? We're all volunteers. And so that crime emergency was a challenge for the city, but a blessing to the ability to provide new resources in this community.
So you've talked a lot about the programs that help support young people. I know I attended one of your festivals and definitely have several journals. Can you talk about how those emerged through your evolution?
Journal was there before there was an academy. These began as a hip hop conference at the University of Maryland. I went to Maryland. I became the president of Black Student Union. I created a conference called Words Beats in Life. And when I graduated, turned it into a nonprofit. In the second year of the conference, which was 2000, we published an academic journal of hip hop. When I graduated, Saturday program and the journal, that was the full scope of the work of the organization, the total vision. Once we produced the journal, then eventually we produced what we called a teach-in called Remixing the Art of Social Change, which was supposed to be an experience of what was written about in the journal. After that, we did an event called Bootleg, with the Bootleg Festival, which was a multimedia festival inspired by an issue of the journal called Bootleg This Journal. The theme was Bootleg This Journal. And so over time, these two things inspired more things. Like the reason why we do international work now is because a friend of mine was a cab driver at the time and met an MC from Uganda and invited him to come to the academy. And when he came to the academy, he invited us to Uganda. And 2 years later, we found enough resources to actually send a delegation to Uganda. So it was, again, this pivoting. being open to what was possible. And that's why we're at 5 priorities now,
Mm-hmm.
20 years later, because each of those things represents either an opportunity or a demand that was made by students, or then later the teaching artists within the organization, or just adults in the community. 8 years ago, we started hosting the Words, Beats, and Life Festival because there were so many of these little things that were happening. We had done things like created the world's first hip hop chess tournament called Bum Rush the Boards, ran the city's public art program called Murals DC. And we created 8 years ago a festival to let people in 1 week celebrate all that the organization did, as opposed to needing to have to go to everything throughout the year. We just created our second festival this year called DMV Made, which is a celebration of arts and culture and health and wellness in DC, Maryland, and Virginia, even beyond hip hop. So we had a punk band perform, go-go bands perform, R&B singers, choral musicians, etc. At the end of the day, our goal is to reach the people that want the kind of community, to be a part of the kind of joy that we're working to cultivate and celebrate here in our city and around the world.
You know, on one of my other conversations, we were talking about the different genres of music, and the person that I spoke with definitely affirmed, you know, there are different genres. In this case, we're talking about jazz and classical, but in the end, the gumbo of all those different genres just help to create a certain experience, and it doesn't need to be one thing or the other. So hearing you say that made me think of what she said. Well, it always connects. Okay, so you've worked with countless artists and educators, like you just mentioned, around the world. Can you recount a moment when you were instrumental in a powerful catalytic shift in the arts, an event that uplifted and reshaped your community?
I mean, I think that a single event, I think that for me, the thing that has been most interesting is to be 21 years into something and still be doing new things. 2 years ago, we started doing a park jam called Jazz and Blossoms as a part of the National Cherry Blossom Festival, which also closes out our annual festival. We hadn't really done too much in jazz. Like, the closest thing to jazz we had done was having a radio show on WPFW, the Jazz and Justice station. It's a community-based radio station here in the DM. But this being open to exploring a different idea about arts and culture, which is that hip hop generation people make jazz, generation people make go-go, hip hop generation people make blues music. And so that if we stopped kind of separating ourselves based on music and really thought about ourselves and our work as a set of generations, that the kind of work we would do and the people that we would serve could be broader. So even DMV Made was a decision to create a festival where we can only book people who are either from here or lived a significant part of their creative development here. Most of the festivals that happen in DC are about inviting somebody from someplace else. There's several lines in the Bible that I think are very true, and one of them is, nowhere is a prophet less welcome than in his own hometown among his own brethren. So the people that know you the best celebrate you the least, unless you go someplace else, go celebrate there and then come back. And so we wanted to do both of those things. We wanted to bring back some of the stars who've gone on to be celebrated by the world, but also lift up some of the people who are still here and making great art, from young people to elders. Like, we had Sweet Honey in the Rock to the Chuck Brown Band. And this idea of saying that there's all this music, all this visual art. We had 6 muralists out there painting. We had steel pan drums, Brazilian drums, a marching band, like all these different kinds of things that make up the culture of our region that are not necessarily often brought together intentionally and connected to health and wellness. This idea that arts and culture promote health and wellness, that life part of Words, Beats, and Life. Even though we're hip hop, even bringing all those things together in the most traditional sense is hip hop. Afrika Bambaataa is often credited as being one of the folks that brought other multiple musical genres other than funk into hip hop. He played punk music, he played rock music, he played jazz. And so this idea of, because I'm sure your listeners know, but when hip hop was created, it didn't have a musical genre. It borrowed from multiple genres to create something new and different. And so now 51 years in, we can revisit that and say, even though we're hip hop, doesn't mean that rap music is the only music that we love and celebrate, participate in. And so why not create a festival that's led by a hip hop group? Does what hip hop did at its beginning, which is bring all of the folks together regardless of the artificial barriers that divide us, whether that's age in the academy, or that's musical genre or medium. So even the people that we worked with painting the murals, some use spray cans, some use acrylic, some use wheat paste. Every major event that we do is about breaking down barriers between people. We host paint jams that aren't just with graffiti writers. I was literally just talking to one of our graffiti instructors about, I need him to have at least a quarter of the artists we're inviting to our next jam be fine artists, and at least a quarter of the artists we're inviting be street artists. And then I added one more. I said, at least a quarter of the artists be current or former academy students to come out and be a part of this paint jam.
You know, this notion of hip hop culture, how it got started and how now you have integrated different genres, and it makes sense. Like, it's something that the way you described it, I'm like, oh, of course it can be all related. And then the roots of hip hop, like never losing sight of that. And then it's the connection to wellness. You know, a lot of time people think whenever it's time to cut anything for saving money purposes, it's the arts that gets cut. But you just mentioned that your work is directly connected to wellness. Can you talk a little bit more about that and how or if that supports your ability to get support, financial support for your...
So the short answer is, one of the things we were talking about, especially, like, I think COVID changed a lot for a lot of people. And one of the things that COVID led us to do was to create virtual programming. And one of the things we talked about was we wanted to create programming less in the words and beats and more in the life, more in the life part of our mission. And so if we were doing a broadcast for an event called Eats Plus Beats, where we're taking a chef who's going to make a dish and a producer who's going to make a beat over the course of 1 hour together, talking about their own journeys as artists, that ideally that food that she or he or they are making is healthy. It is something that we want to encourage people to eat. And the music that the producer is sampling from is something that is affirming and maybe drawing back on a past, lifting up memories for people as they listen to it, or introducing them to music they haven't heard of. And so over and over, for especially the last 4 years, we've really been thinking about the impact of what we do for individuals, for communities, for schools. And a lot of that was inspired by, you know, in the year 2020, we were 18 years old as an organization. So one of the things we did was we put together, we were preparing to do a strategic plan for the next 5 years, and decided instead to convene 3 global think tanks of people we had worked with in the previous 18 years in the United States and the DMV and around the world, and created this thing we call a vision for 2040. And what the reason why it's called a vision for 2040 is because we asked those people from our community, in 20 years, how will the world be different because you were successful at doing what it is that you do? And how could Words Beats in Life and organizations like it support that, be invested in? That led us to create a fellowship for 5 people. We're about to announce next week the 5 newest members of our fellowship, because part of what came out of those think tanks was organizations like us needed to invest in individuals, not just organizations, because those individuals would lead companies or start organizations or just be individuals who are rock stars, publishing and inspiring, whatever it is that they do. And so the wellness piece came out of those conversations, people talking about centering elders and elder wisdom. If you know a person is old, one of the things they're going to talk about is health and making sure that while you're young, you take care, among other things. And so I would love to say that health and wellness has been a part of our work the whole time. It has been, but not in a as pronounced a way. It was more about emotional health, feeling connected to community, and the value of that to promote emotional and spiritual, psychological health, or the physical health of the B-boys in their practice and the work that they were doing, or whatever dancers that we might be working with. But now it's more about how we make the connection between traditional or ancient medicines, Western medicines and methodologies, how it is that we take those cats who are at the juice bar and have them share their recipes, how we get those people that are using non-traditional forms of herbs and things like that to take care of their health. How do we bring those people to the same table as our local federally qualified community health clinic? Because both of them are trying to reach people to do better by themselves, for themselves. And we see arts and culture as a natural bridge to be able to bring those folks together. So like at DMV Made, we had a health and wellness pavilion that also had a face painter in it, also had folks from NOAA, the National Ocean Atmospheric Administration, that monitor the ocean.
Oh,
So,
wow.
but they were there talking about projects that they have around the U.S. about urban heat. There's other groups we wanted to have there that weren't able to make it, but there's so much about nature. We had Holly Bass there from Turnaround Arts. They had this activity called Poem Trees, where they wrote poems and then posted them on trees. But this idea of connecting arts and culture and wellness. How can we not just have wellness fairs? Like the NBC4 does a great job of doing a wellness fair. Put arts and culture in there to actually make it appealing. Most people who do kind of cardio exercise incorporate music into that experience, whether it's classical music, jazz, or hip hop. So it's there. It's just that point out like, hey, you know that you got arts and culture as a part of this, right? So that's been a lot of what we've been doing, is trying to make what is hidden in plain sight more obvious.
Well, one of the things that I think is fascinating and directly related to what you have described as a part of your way of being is this natural evolution from childhood to now senior, elder states, talking about what does it look like to engage at different points in your life. Like when some people think of hip hop, those that maybe aren't connected to it and definitely aren't connected to it in this way, they may have a negative connotation about what the culture is about, what it means to participate in some of your programs. But everything that I hear you talking about, it's all about grounding and empowerment and self-mastery and health. And how do you ensure that people are familiar with the depth that exists within your work? One of the reasons why I did this podcast is because I know some incredible people that are doing fabulous things. And you may not see them, but the work that they contribute to, you experience and you just leave filled with some sort of emotion, whether it's joy, anger, something. And I'm like, how do you ensure that people know that Words Beats in Life is a hip hop nonprofit and all of these other elements are critical to its being able to be successful?
I think one of the things I would encourage people to do is to the degree that it's possible, to work on something for a long time. Because one of the things that working on something for a long time does is allow you to have a very different perspective than the person that just discovers you. I think it was probably 10 years into being the executive director of Words Beats in Life, but I started to look at our name differently. And one day, I don't know why, but I saw white, Black, Asian, Latino, and Indigenous from that WBLA now Inc., right? This idea that from its inception, the goal was to serve and to reflect the whole human family. Unintentionally, that wasn't like I didn't come up with that name with those words in mind. We sat back and looked at it and was like, we've always been an organization dedicated to serving humanity. One of the things I love to say, and I want to popularize this term, that we are a Black-led organization that's human serving. It's important because most of the human serving organizations I can point to in America or the world are all white-led.
Say more about that.
So, one of the things I've appreciated over time is that if you take a photo of our student body or people at our events, depending on what event you're coming to, it kind of looks like a United Colors of Benetton ad. It's everybody. It's not just folks that look like you and me, but the leadership of the organization looks like you and me. And intentionally create space for everyone who sees themselves as a part of what we're doing as welcome at the table. This idea that, like, if you think about something like let's just say like a Red Cross, right? That's a human serving organization because why? They collect blood, they distribute blood, they help people to get displaced because of fires or wars, etc. But that's a pretty white-led organization.
Absolutely.
Most of the things that serve humanity, regardless of color, creed, or nationality, are not necessarily led at maybe a leader, but usually not their whole leadership team. Looks like the two of us on this podcast. But a lot of the groups that serve people to look like us, you and me, don't look like us. Maybe a couple people in leadership, and that's not to diminish those, but I'm saying like everyone in leadership at Words Beats in Life is a person of color. Our board of directors is 80% Black folks. And I think that there's value in saying, yes, we're going to serve us, but we're not serving us to the exclusion of the rest of the human family. You know what I'm saying?
I want to talk about creative entrepreneurship, right? Like, I would consider you a creative entrepreneur. Would you consider yourself that?
I would.
Okay. Can you talk about what defines the essence of a creative entrepreneur?
Well, I think that there's multiple kinds. I think that there are individual creative entrepreneurs who work to create a business that allows them to use their creative brilliance to make a difference, whether that's through a product or an event or a set of ideas if they're publishing. I think that at the heart of everything we do is some form of art and employing an artist to be able to create that work. I usually actually don't describe myself as a creative entrepreneur. I usually would just say I'm an arts manager. But I think that both are required because so much of what my responsibility is at Words Beats in Life is to find resources and partnerships that make the work possible, to diversify our sources of income, to make our work sustainable and expansive. You know, pre-COVID, our budget was about $480,000. And that's 18 years in. Budget had been a little bit higher in previous years, but that's what it was. Today, this is the beginning of a new fiscal year. Our last fiscal year, our budget was 2.1 million. And I've set a goal to try to reach 3 million this year by pivoting out of programming and expanding my work in fundraising, corporate sponsorship, individual giving, and self-generating revenue through events. And so really focusing my attention on the revenue and the expense side of the business instead of just creating these dope things that people come to and enjoy, but really thinking, how can, from a financial point of view, this place become strong enough that when I leave, there isn't.
What is it? You gonna leave? You're not leaving.
Cold, dead hands, but everybody got to go sometime. The idea that I want to create a job that somebody else wants. You know, a lot of founders create jobs that nobody else wants, which is why the organizations die. And some of that's about money. Some of that's about culture. Some of that is about expectations. I had multiple friends I sent $100,000 executive director jobs to, and they were like, that ain't no money. And at the time I was making much less than that. So trying to build something where someone wants the job after someone leaves is really my focus. And that, again, that was inspired by COVID, because pre-COVID, my actual position was, if the company dies when I die, I'm okay with that, because what I did with my life was invest in young people and communities and in artists in ways that I hope they take that energy and apply it to whatever it is they do next. But then I saw a bunch of organizations close in COVID that I thought would be replaced by the same people who worked in those organizations, and none of those efforts have been recreated. And so that was a wake up for me that, nah, bro, they're not necessarily, like, you can't count on other people to have the same kind of drive to create something. You got to do what you can to try to build something that someone else can come and take the baton further, as opposed to starting a whole new race.
That's, we talk about entrepreneurship all the time and what it looks like to run a business, and a creative business at that. And, when I think about the work that the journeys and the people that I'm looking to highlight in this work, they are creatives in so many different facets of the work. The entrepreneurship road, though, that is very distinct. And oftentimes we talk about artists being entrepreneurs, but maybe not adopting or even embracing that title. But from your vantage point, what is an unseen hurdle or common misconception in the world of creative entrepreneurship?
I think, so I was naming the kinds of entrepreneurs to say that, like, everyone who's an entrepreneur isn't creating a business to employ other people.
Right.
Some people just want a business so that they can make the amount of money they want to make doing what it is that they do. So I think the thing that it didn't occur to me when I started Words Beats in Life, that no matter how big the budget got or however much money I raised or made, I got to do it again next year. This is the thing you got to do every year. It's very stressful, but this is also why I'm saying, like, being in this 21 years, this is the first, to be honest with you, to be totally honest with you and your listeners, I never really thought about myself as an executive director until probably like the last 3 years, because in a lot of ways, a lot of the stuff I'm talking about, I had to be there to help support it. I had to be either the academy director or there watching the academy director to make sure they were following the program. The last 2 years is really the first time I've really had really competent, really accomplished people to come in and run programming, so that now I can focus on how to grow our budget to $3 million this year and get everybody a raise and create 12 new teaching positions and expand to another site and look at how we're going to expand to Baltimore to become a regional organization. Being able to step away from programming, knowing what it is that I helped to build, and to know that it's competently being run now, means when I go out and tell a story about the work, I can actually have you come and show up and see that the story is true. But to answer your question, So the first piece is that if you're running a business where you got to pay other people, or even if you just got to pay yourself, if you're paying yourself, you want to maintain a particular quality of life, all money goes away. Whether it's funding money or a customer, everything goes away and you've always got to be working to find new people who know about and will value what it is that you do. One of the things I've been really fortunate with is that some of the things I'm saying about hip hop, I feel like I'm part of the generation of hip hop that saw those things, that has rappers in it that were talking about the same things that I'm talking about in terms of the connections. Like the RZA just had a classical album come out.
I heard.
Been scoring films. We took a skill set that he had and applied it to a different musical genre because he wanted to challenge himself to be able to do something. He also plays chess. He was a part of an initiative called Science Genius, that's done by the creators of Hip Hop Ed, where they do a science competition where young people got to describe scientific content in rap lyrics similar to the GZA. So he'd come and be a judge of the quality of what it is they're writing about.
Wow.
But this idea that hip hop isn't just, it's not a thing that's in the corner. It's not a separate part of your experience. For people who are a part of it, it's part of a worldview. It's an economic model. It is philosophy. It is everything short of a religion. I even know some people who say, is hip hop your religion? Not because they're worshiping a person within it, but it's their spiritual practice that they have to listen to or rap along with one of their favorite artists. And so thinking about the kind of entrepreneur you want to be, do you want to be the kind of person that takes care of yourself and your family? Because there's nothing wrong with that. Or do you want to be the kind of person that creates a business that creates jobs for other people? I know early on in the creation of Words Beats Life, I wanted to take those artists that I was asking to volunteer, who had a job at Starbucks and then did their DJing on the weekend when they could. I wanted to replace Starbucks as their consistent money so that we would become their wedge against poverty that would allow them to fully invest in being an artist. Being an arts educator and being an artist still made them a working artist.
Okay, so some of the things I hear you saying as far as hurdles and creative entrepreneurship is definitely regularly having to recreate or fundraise to support your programs. Personnel, finding people that can do the work and maintain a level of quality that supports the vision that you're setting out to do. I would say that's the truth for any organization. What part makes the creative point distinct?
I think one of the most difficult things about employing artists to be educators is that most of them didn't receive a formal education in the art form they practice, that they learned informally. And so that there oftentimes is resistance around the idea of establishing a system, a method, a process we're going to cultivate future artists through. When you learned how to rap by being in ciphers, someone brought a beat and you just showed up and you got good over time. But the thing is that that's why we got 5 outcomes. That skill set mastery is the first because it's usually why the young person came. But I think that for me, it's been about not just how we employ artists as educators, but also how we look at other opportunities. We're getting ready to head to Uganda for the 12th time. We're taking 2 of the artists we've been working with for the last decade for the first time. Both of them will be their first time in Uganda. And we're taking a 3rd artist who we worked with who helped create the first Remixing the Art of Social Change. So maintaining those relationships with those artists, regardless of where they go and what it is they pursue, I feel like that's one of the things that's unique to the running an organization that works with artists, is that as long as you got good relationships with those artists, as long as your bank account continues to go up, you will be able to continue to afford to collaborate with them. So maintaining, like, I ran into the owner of Caribou Books, one of the jobs I had in college the other day.
Oh, yeah.
Even if the store still existed, I don't know what I would do because I don't have a book that would let me continue to engage with that job. So part of being this multifold organization means that artists can plug in different ways. Young people who come through the program are now coming back to be teachers. Young people who came through the program are now applying to be fellows within the organization at this stage in their artistic development. And so as long as we are a living organization that continues to grow and refine and develop, there's always going to be room for you to come back and engage with the resources and opportunities, because that's the key, is like, is your business thriving? Is it surviving? Or is it dying? If your business is dying, doing everything you can to make sure that either it has a graceful death and that you take care of the people that it impacted. If it's surviving, thinking about what is beyond survival. What kind of partnerships and opportunities do you need to pursue that are not mission creep, but that are programmatic expansion? The partner that you had to do something, like 2 years ago, we were contacted because we decided to do something that I thought was important, which was to create a literary magazine for students in the academy so that we could say, every poet that's in our program or every MC and some of the visual artists could be published as a part of coming through the program. That literary magazine was seen by Washington Performing Arts, and they contacted us to say, hey, can you partner with us to produce another issue, but focus around a particular theme? Could we do that? And I said, well, if we were going to do that, we'd need to create a writers in residency program to have the young people to cultivate the kind of work that we need to be in that issue. We did that. They paid for it. They performed. I just had a call 2 weeks ago with the Folklife Festival who want young poets to be a part of their next festival. And I said, well, we would love to develop a writer in residency program. And that one's going to be focused on Washington, D.C., the city, its history, its culture. And we're going to put kids into residence for a few months, write pieces, film. But the point is we took a model from a previous partnership and found a new partner to apply it to. That's not a brand new program. It's taking the same framework and applying it to a new partner. I feel like that's what happens if you're in a growing business or a thriving business. You don't have to do different things for everybody. You can do slight tweaks. You know, I like to say the emphasis. The word is emphasis, but I just say a different accent of emphasis on it. And I think that's part of the challenge of being a creative entrepreneur is you don't make widgets. You often create experiences. Plus, that experience that we're shooting for is joy. Some cases is nostalgia. Some cases is a reflection of creativity or opportunity, but also promoting ownership, the idea that young people own what it is they create. If we publish it, we don't own it. We own the publication it came in, but you still own that poetry. You still own that music. You can put it on streaming platforms, you go and perform it, etc. Thinking about how it is you create a business where any vendor that interacts with you, they're also winning by helping. You evaluate our program. How can we help you win? Well, we tell people you evaluated our program and we encourage them to go to your business too. We invite you to be a guest speaker for young people. So you've got to kind of give back that you're giving to the community. Like you got to build a thing that lets more than the leader or the founder or the entrepreneur be able to shine and win.
That is the key, because no one person is going to be the end all be all to an organization, especially something that you built, even if you are regularly there. I guess I'm going to switch gears because I heard you mention the Bible and spiritual, maybe even religion. And in your bio, it says an expert in Muslimness. Say more, like how, if at all, does that come into the way that you work? And what is Muslimness? Did I say it right?
Well, you did. So a few answers to the question. One of the things about traveling abroad is that oftentimes when we would travel, we would look for hip hop communities. A lot of times those hip hop communities were made up or led by Muslims. And so I'm Muslim. And so we would find Muslim communities in Pakistan, of course, in Lebanon. We'd also find Christian communities in both of those places. In Uganda, every place we'd go, there'd be Muslim artists who were involved in hip hop, oftentimes playing a leadership role. And so one of the things we did, I want to say probably 7 or 8 years ago, we created the priority of centering marginalized voices because we decided we wanted to start lifting up people whose voices are marginalized within hip hop, not marginalized by the larger society. So the first group that we focused on for about 3 years was the Muslim community. So we created an initiative called From Ciphers to Ciphers, Hip Hop is Muslim. Ciphers is the Urdu word for zero. That is the beginnings of the word cipher, which again is zero, but in hip hop, it's a circle of people, usually MCs, sometimes dancers in the center of a cipher. So we said from ciphers to ciphers, hip hop is Muslim. And so it was kind of the first religious community that we did a direct outreach to that included gallery shows, theatrical productions, concerts, panel discussions. The next community we want to focus on is actually the First Nation communities that are involved in hip hop.
Yes.
There's a number of Native American muralists. We had Greg Deal, who's an amazing street artist at this year's DMV Made, because a good portion of his career was here in DC. We also had Chief Raka, who is a Native American hoop dancer, but also a B-girl at DMV Made. So we're beginning to start to edge our way towards lifting up First Nation communities' contributions to hip hop. We wanted to do that because we didn't go to those countries looking for Muslims. We went looking for hip hop, and we found Muslims as the keepers. But again, like I said, that's the first community. But we want to start to pivot towards lifting up the contributions of First Nation communities within hip hop because they're there. We're just often not seen. And that's the whole idea of centering the marginalized voices within hip hop.
Okay, so we've talked almost an hour about hip hop culture, the work of your hip hop nonprofit, and not once did I hear a name that's currently popular in rap. Quavo, Offset, maybe. I know Kendrick Lamar. I like Kendrick Lamar, but what I'm saying is, at no point did we mention any of those people. So, do you ever find yourself helping people understand that it can be both? And or maybe even why that's not a part of your work, or maybe is it?
I think every company on some level or another is a reflection of the biases of the founder. And so I think that part of becoming an entrepreneur is trying to figure out your lane. Like when we started the academy, every single organization that I found 20 years ago was running rap programs almost exclusively. A few were doing DJing. Like there was an organization in DC called the Midnight Forum that was doing all of the elements of hip hop with volunteer teachers for the most part. But I think that if you tie your business to what is popular, when it's not popular, neither are you.
Hmm.
So for example, when we started, like Jay-Z was the biggest thing. And I don't know, like to be honest, I feel like rap music is kind of good. Like people know about it, people who want it, get it, and people that want to get into lyrics and all. Like there's plenty of platforms dedicated within the hip hop space to rap music. But oftentimes when you do something like go to a hip hop conference, it's still also about rap music. It's not about the dancers. It's not about the DJs. It's not about the writers.
Why
I
is
have an
that?
expansive view of hip hop, like
Okay.
rather than a limited. I think that you got to recognize there's a whole community of people that if I say I run a hip hop nonprofit, they think that means I'm a rapper. I've met people who asked me upon first meeting me, so is your mission statement a rap? And I would be like, if I ran a ballet company, would you ask me if my mission statement was a dance? Because you would actually know that ballet has hundreds of years of tradition and respect for it as an institution, versus you think that I'm just the guy in the loud music in the car next to you. But can I tell you, yes, I am that guy with the loud music.
That too. Right.
But I'm also the person that's going into our neighborhood schools and getting young people to imagine something is possible for their lives that they want, that the musicians that they listen to can be inspiration, either a cautionary tale or motivation for what it is they should aspire to. That it's not about policing the music, but about understanding that hip hop culture really does have a community, has a global community, has traditions, has history that's worth learning about, that's worth incorporating into your life and your practice. It's not just about rap music. Like I host a radio show, two of them actually. One of them centers poetry, and the other one actually centers music about love, whether that's hip hop or R&B or jazz, because I think that part of the way that rap music, for many of us, has stunted our growth is it's trapped us with what we loved when we were 13, 14, or 15. I like a lot of the music that's out commercially, even the music that's violent and destructive. I like the music, but I also recognize the danger of it. Like I've never had a hot Cheeto in my life because I don't like spicy foods, but I have had a Cheeto. It's junk food, and I know it's junk food. The problem is not that I had it.
Okay.
The problem is if that's my whole diet. My goal is to say, what does salad look like on that dish? What does a leaner cut of beef look like on that dish? What does some tofu look like as a part of your diet? So much of what I say now, even 21 years, and it goes back to stuff I said at the very beginning, which I used to love to quote rap lyrics. Like there's a line from Andre 3000 where he says, I met a critic and made her mess her drawers. She said she thought hip hop was only guns and alcohol. I said, oh, hell no. But yet it's that too, because you can't discriminate because you done read a book or two. This idea that, yes, you can be critical of what you love. You can be conflicted about things you enjoy. You can recognize you participate in things that do you harm, but even taking the time to reflect about what does you harm means it also is making room for you to think about what could actually be doing good for you. So we don't tell young people, no, your music is terrible. Like, for what? I like some of your music. Some of you I haven't even heard before. Put me on. But I also want to share some of my music too, because I grew up in that tradition where when my father, who lived in Brooklyn, but worked for the State University of New York, we'd have to drive up to Albany. We'd do a road trip. And the first thing we do is go and visit a tape store. It wasn't even a record store. They'd be selling tapes. And we'd buy like 5 tapes for the car ride. And we'd talk about the music together. He didn't pick any of it. He let me pick music by artists I wanted to hear from, dirty version and all. And we would listen to it and then we would talk about it so that I could actually think about this thing that I might normally passively take in. And that's the role of the loving adults in this space. They're hip hop artists too. They know some of your music. They might not like all your music, but they'll ask you to come in and they'll talk to you about it. Not to tell you to stop liking it, but to say, oh, you like this? Well, maybe you might like this. Because there aren't cultural institutions that have taken on the responsibility of educating anybody about the past forms of the past artifacts of anybody's culture, except a museum. And hip hop just started getting in the museum. So there's not a place where young people can go to be instructed in the 50-year history of this thing that they are at this point just being introduced to. So we don't need to educate kids about rap because they know that. The question is, can we engage in a conversation about what they listen to on their earbuds when they walk in? Talk to them about the what was happening in history when X, Y, and Z album came out, and that's where having really smart, really engaged artists who are not snobs about what they love. They know what they like, but they can also appreciate what other people like and other things,
Let the curiosity lead them, like not be restricted and limited in their thoughts. Woof. I mean, I feel so many things about what you've said for so many reasons, right? Like we've uplifted what it means to be within Words, Beats, and Life, and that your programs, there's something for everybody to connect to if they want to. But also the both and, like, some people think it's one or the other, but both and I think is really important to say explicitly, but also the intention behind it. So it's not just, let's just have a this or that. Like I hear you talking very deliberately about all the thought that you put into your work. And, 21 years in, that's pretty impressive. Like, congratulations on all of your success and the evolution. I guess, how does someone, what are the steps to do something like this?
I'll remix a Kwame Ture quote. He said he encouraged people to join an organization. This idea that you don't have to do it alone. And so what I did was I formed an organization with 3 co-founders, Kaniqua Abdul Malik, Steve Legerfo, and Letisha Jackson. The 4 of us got together and said, well, we want to continue this hip hop conference. Let's start a nonprofit. We spent about 9 months doing research, writing about it, thinking of strategies to deliver programming for that volunteer program. We then tested what we thought would work with young people from other people's programs, and then we launched our own. But by the time we launched our own, the other co-founders weren't there anymore. So I would say find people who you agree with enough to work with on the thing that you agree about. Second is have a vision that is big enough that new people will learn about it and want to be a part of it. That if it's super narrow or if it's super small, it's hard for other people to get excited about that idea. And then I think the third thing is to know that the beginning will be the most difficult part and just accept that. Think about yourself as a seed planted in soil that's got to grow. Before you become a tree, you got to be just a little sprout to maybe you grow to be a sapling. Hopefully no bird comes and eats you when you're a sprout to become a tree.
Right.
Know that trees exist. And if you live long enough, if you get enough water, you get enough sun, maybe you get, you don't have too many dogs using the bathroom on you, you can grow up to be a tree. If you're a tree, then you've got branches and the ability to see yourself replicated in other ways, whether that's acorns or whatever. But this idea that the other side of that struggle, there are living examples of companies that do what you want to do in maybe some different way or maybe some different geography, but that lets you know that what you imagine is possible. I think that the last thing is to keep imagining what is possible. You might have thought that your seed was an apple tree, and then as you grow, you discover you actually a cherry tree. Totally different fruit, but it's equally delicious. But be open to the fact that you will change. I posted this video on Instagram earlier this week, and it named a bunch of companies and said what they were when they started. Nokia was a toilet paper company when it started. The people that make phones.
Phone people?
Yeah. So it named like 10 different businesses that were something else when they started. And I didn't fact check it, but I love the idea. Entrepreneurs had an idea to fill a service, but then as they began to grow and saw other opportunities, they were willing to let themselves become something more than what they started off to be. We started off to be a once a month Saturday program. Today, we are the arts educators in 3 DC public schools during the day. Our teachers are teaching comic creation, graffiti, roses and concrete, and music production as classes during the day. And then after school programming at now 4 other schools, plus our own after school program at our location. I go back to the academy because the academy is the thing we do every day. The journal, the rap laureate publication, or even our new magazine called the EQ that just tells the story of our impact. Those are all things that happen a couple times a year. They get released versus the bread and butter of what we do is educate young people in DC about the elements of hip hop and things that are kind of hip hop adjacent, but that are still connected. Be open to the fact that what you thought you were going to be when you started might not be what you are 5 years later, 10 years later, 20 years later. The academy is still central to why we exist and what we do. But the success of the academy allowed us to say, well, we do all this work to invest in young people and we employ a set of adult artists. What about all those adult artists who are too old to be in the academy, but also need access to resources, information, and opportunity? What are we doing for them? We try them to perform at our festivals. We take them around the world as cultural ambassadors of the culture. We do interviews and publish their work. Like, it's thinking about how to be of service to a community that has been pigeonholed as just rap music when it is so much more. And that's not to diminish rap music. And there's some amazing musicians. It is to say that I met a critic and made her mess her draws. She said she thought it was only guns and alcohol. I said, oh, hell no. But yet it's that too. It's all of this. Hip hop is words. It is beats. It is life.
Oh my gosh, that's perfect way to end this conversation. Mazi, like I couldn't have planned that better myself. Thank you so much for being on the Cultural Catalyst podcast. If people want to learn more about your work or reach out, like how do they find you? What are the best ways to learn about the work that you're doing?
The best place is our Instagram account, which is just Words, Beats, and Life, or our website, which is wblinc.org. If you want to get in-depth knowledge, the website has a whole publication section. Check out our magazine. It's called The EQ. We interview alumni, current teachers, and partners from around the world so you can hear from other people about the impact that this work is doing in the world.
Wow. I am so inspired, and I hope you are too. Listeners, go to the website, learn more about what happens within their organization, and maybe even figure out a way to get involved. If there are any parents listening, think about all the creative opportunities that have just been described in this space. I'm excited about the future of WBL. Any final thoughts or messages for our audience?
Congratulations on this new podcast. You are wise beyond your years, and the fact that you're making room to be able to lift up the voices of other people, speak to you as just a light in this community. So thank you so much for sharing this space.
Thank you, Mazi. Next time on the Cultural Catalyst podcast, you'll hear from another great person. Like I always say, until soon. Thank you for tuning in to Cultural Catalyst. If you enjoyed today's episode, make sure to subscribe to the podcast and follow us for more inspiring stories from the world of arts and entertainment. You can find me on social media at MCE Arts and Alison T. McNeil on LinkedIn. Please leave a review and tune in to our next episode for more creatives behind the curtain. See you next time.